Hi, I'm Izzy from Find a PhD, and we're going to take you through all you need to know about fully funded PhDs in the UK. So you might be here because you're interested in doing a PhD. Maybe you've found a subject area that you really enjoy and you want to continue studying. Maybe you're coming to the end of your undergrad or your master's degree and you're thinking about next steps. Or maybe you've been in work for a while and you're thinking about returning to uni so you can do some research in a subject you're interested in. Well, fully funded PhDs from UKRI are one of the most sought after PhD opportunities in the UK. But don't worry, if you've never heard of UKRI, we're here to take you through exactly who they are and what these PhDs are all about. It can be so confusing trying to find a PhD. There are so many different types and funding options. You might have heard of phrases like UKRI studentship, self-proposed, advertised, collaborative doctoral partnership, DTP CDTs, iCase, and it's very overwhelming. But don't worry, we're here to help. We're going to break all of these down. We're going to take you through exactly what a fully funded PhD is, who funds this, the subjects you can study, the different types like the ones shown here, and the funding you receive and how you apply. So first up, what actually is a fully funded PhD? Well, there are three key things. Number one, you get to do research into the subject you want to study, and there are lots of subject areas and you can propose your own. This is usually done over 3 to 4 years in a full-time PhD or longer if you're doing it part-time. Secondly, you get dedicated training either at the start of your PhD program or throughout. This training is in addition to your research and it usually covers useful techniques like statistics or transferable skills. And this is really good if you're coming straight from an undergrad degree. It can top up those skills and give you the knowledge you need to do your PhD. If you already have a master's, this training can still be really useful. It's good to make sure your skill set is up to the level of PhD, but it's also useful maybe if you want to change your subject area slightly. And lastly, this is a really good opportunity if you've been in work and you want to return to university. And lastly, and very importantly, you also get the money you need to do your PhD. And we're going to cover exactly what you get in this video. So who is actually funding these fully funded PhDs? Well, you might have heard of UKRI, and that stands for the United Kingdom Research and Innovation. They're a national body that invests money from the UK government into research. Now they do many things. They help with innovation between business and academia. They fund and support higher education in England. And they support lots of other aspects of research like training, collaboration, commercialization, and research culture. But most importantly to you, they provide fully funded PhDs through their 7 research councils. So the 7 research councils each have a selection of subject areas that they fund. So if we go through them, you'll get an idea of how broad some of these are. So the AHRC funds subjects in the creative arts, which includes everything from music to English literature and philosophy. The BBSRC has a focus on the biological and life sciences. The ESRC funds research into the social science disciplines like economics and sociology. EPSRC is focused on natural sciences and engineering. AMASI funds research into medical and clinical sciences. NERC is focused on natural and environmental research. And lastly, STFC funds research into technology-based science, like particle physics. So it might be really obvious where your subject of interest lies, but there may be some overlap between the research councils. So for instance, you might find BBSRC funds a psychology PhD project, or 2 research councils could collaborate. So an example could be NERC and ESRC. They might collaborate to explore the interface between the built and natural environments. So it might be worth exploring other research councils if your interest is interdisciplinary. Within the 7 research councils, there are several types of PhD projects that are common to all subjects. And the first main type is self-proposed. And in these projects, you come up with the idea and propose this idea in a research proposal, which is your opportunity to show your idea could become a PhD project. This tends to be more common in the arts, humanities, and social science subjects. It's a great way to be specific about what you want to research, but it can involve you investing time into your project before you've actually started, as you have to do some of the initial research and contact the supervisors yourself. We have a video on how to write a great research proposal if this is something you want to do. The alternative, though, is to apply to an advertised project, where the background and the aims have been established. As such, this is a lot more common in the STEM subjects. It's a great way of joining ongoing research without proposing your own topic, and there is still usually some flexibility as the project evolves. So within both self-proposed and advertised PhD projects, there might be the opportunity to do one of 5 types of projects. And just a quick reminder at this point, remember this is a general overview, so the exact details can vary between research councils and universities, so definitely check out where you're interested in applying to. But in general, there is a doctoral training partnership. Now that's a 4-year PhD program across a network of universities. The research themes are broad and they can cover the entire remit of the Research Council themes. You join a cohort of PhD students and the universities in the partnership work together to offer training, usually in the first year of your program. You then progress to working on your PhD project at one of those universities. The next type is Industrial Collaborative Awards in Science and Engineering, or ICASE, and these are typically offered by research councils in the STEM subjects. They're a PhD that's done in collaboration with the university and an industrial partner, so you get to spend time working with both organisations. And if you're interested in doing this, these projects can sometimes be found as part of a DTP. So a Centre for Doctoral Training PhD is very similar to a DTP. A group of research organisations like universities or industry partners work together in collaboration on a research focus, and this research area is usually more specific than that of a DTP. A CDT is also a 4-year PhD program where you join a cohort of other PhD students and receive training. We then have collaborative doctoral partnerships, and they're a type of PhD program more common in the arts, humanities, and social sciences. Again, they can be between universities or also other institutions like museums, educational trusts, or archives. Again, these organisations work together to set out the PhD projects that students can apply to, and they provide those training opportunities. And last but not least, we have open doctoral awards. Now they're very similar to the last example, except that these are for self-proposed PhDs, usually in the arts, humanities, and social sciences. You propose your project to a university with UKRI DTP funding. If they accept it, you can then be considered for the Arts and Humanities Research Council funding. So these are some of the most common types of PhD programs on offer from UKRI. You can usually find them listed under the headings here, but some may be called an acronym, which is made up of the universities or institutions involved in the partnership. It's also worth being aware that there are a few other opportunities here that aren't listed or advertised like this. So an example could be the MRC, which actually funds institutes, units and centres that have a really specific research focus, and they're usually associated with a university. But in general, these are the main types of PhD programs from UKRI you're likely to find. UKRI PhDs are really competitive because they're great opportunities with the funding provided. So in order to apply, there are 2 main requirements. Firstly, you need a relevant undergraduate degree. And second, you need evidence that you have the experience and suitability to do research in the area of your PhD. This experience can take the form of a master's degree or relevant work experience. And the additional criteria to be aware of is your nationality. So UK home students need to be UK nationals or have met the residency requirements like having settled status or indefinite leave to remain. Unfortunately, since Brexit, EU students who do not have settled status or other residency status are now considered international students. But the good news is that UKRI PhDs are open to international students. Up to 30% of the places on offer can be awarded to international students. So, very importantly, what funding is available if you're awarded a UKRI PhD? Well, firstly, your tuition fees. Now, you never see this money. Your research council pays your university directly. But the biggest thing to be aware of here is if you're an international student, the tuition fees are only covered up to the UK home student rate, also known as the domestic rate. If you're an international student, it's worth checking what the university expects for tuition fee payments. Secondly, you usually get a research training support grant. Again, this is paid directly to your university or institution, and you can use it to buy or pay for things you need for your research. So this could be consumables, access to equipment, resources, or maybe even fieldwork expenses. The amount can vary, and it is more common in the STEM subjects. And if you're an international student, you can still receive this full amount. And lastly, you get a stipend to cover your cost of living. This is paid directly to you every month like a salary, and it's tax-free. The amount usually goes up slightly every academic year. It is possible to live on this stipend and still do the things you enjoy, but you will have to live within the means of being a student. And if you're an international student, you can still receive this full amount. A quick note here, it's worth checking the duration of your funding to find out whether or not you'll continue to receive your funding and your stipend during your thesis write-up period. And there are 2 additional pieces of funding on offer for those who it applies to. So some PhDs just offer some additional extra funding. Now this can really vary between programs, so it's worth asking when you apply. If you receive this money, it might help you to cover fees related to conferences, fieldwork, or even an internship. So a good example of this could be the Science Technology Facilities Council. Now it varies between programs, but you might be able to access certain research facilities in the UK or use the long-term attachment funds if you want to visit an international facility like CERN. Or for example, if you're on an ICASE PhD, you might get additional funds to cover the cost of visiting your industry partner. But again, it's worth checking this when you apply. And lastly, your research council can also cover the costs if you need additional support due to disability, mental health, long-term health conditions, or specific learning difficulty like dyslexia or dyspraxia. Now the processes can vary, but you usually apply for this through your university, who then talk to the research council for you. And it's good to know that this is needs tested, not means tested. So your personal financial situation is not a consideration. The research council then gives your university the money, and your university will put the support in place that you need. Just to end this section on funding, there are 3 conditions of the funding that it's good to be aware of. Firstly, it's a grant, so you don't usually need to repay anything. An exception might be if you leave your PhD and accidentally still received a stipend payment, then of course you would need to repay that. Secondly, you can't have both UKRI fully funded PhD and still receive the PhD loan for doctoral students from Student Finance England or Wales. It's one or the other. So if you start your PhD with a student finance loan and then receive UKRI funding, you must cancel the student finance loan. And lastly, you can't work full-time while on a UKRI PhD. Now, unless it's specifically a part of your PhD, so that could be the PIPS internship if you're on a DTP program, or an ICASE PhD or an ICASE Plus PhD, so there are exceptions. Sometimes part-time work is allowed, but it's worth checking with your university. So we've covered the types of PhDs and the funding, but how do you actually find one of these PhD programs? Well, to help you start thinking about how to find a PhD, firstly think about what you want to study and why. This will help you work out which research council best fits your area of interest. Try to be specific and think about this in detail. So what's the exact subject area? Is it one subject or does it link to others? What gap will your research fill and why is it important? And then what do you actually enjoy about that research? Is it a specific subject area or the type of work or technique that you're actually using? Once you know the answers to these questions, you can start thinking about which research council best covers the field you want to study. This might be obvious if it's a clearly defined area, or it might be less clear if your interest covers multiple subject areas. It's then important to see whether what you want to study fits the values of the Research Council. To do this, look at the Research Council's strategy, remit, and programs to learn about the types of research they fund. You might find it's a lot more than you expect. Here are some examples. So take the ESRC, look at that subject list alone, it's a long one. And then if you look at the BBSRC, for example, now they fund research into certain subject areas, although they're still quite broad, but they also fund research into the technology that underpins those subject areas, as well as research that connects academia and industry. So there's a lot of space to find opportunities within each Research Council strategy for the project that you want to study. So you might still be wondering, well, how do I actually find a PhD project? Well, we can help. We have a database of PhDs, and you can search for a PhD that fits your criteria, whether it's subject, location, or type. You can then look at each PhD opportunity to find out more about what's on offer. So your first step is to find the project that you want, and that can go one of two ways. You either need to find an advertised PhD project that fits your requirements, or if you're self-proposing the PhD topic, you'll need to develop the idea yourself. You then need to consider the funding. This is usually clearly stated as part of an advertised project. But if you're self-proposing, you might need to look for a university that has the right expertise, resources, but also has access to UKRI funding. And then when you're ready, you need to apply to the university or the research organisation. Now, an application might involve an application form, a personal statement, or maybe a research proposal. And it's a lot more common to submit a research proposal if you're self-proposing your PhD project. Applications for UKRI PhDs usually open October to November, the year before your PhD would start, and then they close in January to February. And it's worth noting, if you're self-proposing your project and your university accepts your project application, you then need to check whether or not they'll automatically put you forward for the UKRI funding, or whether or not you'll need to submit a second application explaining why your project should be considered for the UKRI funding. So I hinted at it in the last slide, but when you're applying for one of these fully funded Research Council PhDs, you apply directly to the university that's offering the PhD position. The university then interviews you, provides the training and resources if you're accepted onto the program, and that's where you'll do your PhD, and it's the university that usually pays your stipend. Now, you might have noticed I've not mentioned anything about the Research Council in the application process, and that's because you don't actually interact with them. Just in case you're interested, in general, it's your university that bids to UKRI for the funding. If UKRI accepts the bid, they give the funding to your university. So when applying for your PhD, make sure you're applying to the university, not UKRI or the Research Council. So we're finally coming to the end of this talk, and thank you for sticking it out this long. If you want to learn more, make sure you check out our detailed guides. So we have one on UKRI that goes through everything I've said here in more detail, and you can read it at your own pace. We also have one in the bottom left here on the different types of PhDs I mentioned. So if you're interested in a CDT, a DTP, or an iCase, you could check that out. And if you know where you want to study, like what type of research council you think might have the PhD project you would like to do, then we have a guide on each research council that goes into the different types of programs and projects on offer. And there are other places to get help too. If you're still at university, make sure you use the career service or ask an academic in the field you're interested in, or even your personal tutor for advice on whether or not they know of any opportunities. If you want to hear more from PhD students like me, check out our blogs for more on PhD life and top tips. And make sure you check out our database. We have lots of PhD opportunities listed here, both in the UK and abroad. And thank you so much for listening and sticking it out this far. All the links are in the description, and good luck with your PhD journey.